Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, Mike and John with Coffee and the Bull. Today we've got Jason Garbo with us. He is the victim for this episode. So I know Jason from a couple years ago. We were working together at an agency. He was a great dude then, kind of an okay dude now. He started writing a couple books, and fame goes to people's heads. You know how that goes. It's just downhill from you don't want to meet your heroes. Well, it's kind of where we're at. No, all kidding aside, Jason's a great dude. He reached out to us, kind of in support of the podcast, and we worked out this kind of a team deal where he's got some books and could be entertaining for different people. So it's just kind of a trade off that we got going on right now. So
I got a hat.
Yeah, John got a hat, so hopefully it'll be something he can cover up in teeth. But one of the things that we got going on today with Jason is we're going to be talking about one of his outlets was writing.
Correct.
It wasn't he didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want to be a fictional author. It was an outlet for stress and things that he had experienced at work. He had a lot of stress with law enforcement, and he did investigations in a realm that we did. Typically a lot of cops don't get to do. Like me and John, our experience has been more on the lower level. With street type stuff. Hey, we'll
introductory
stuff.
We'll do
introductory stuff, traffic stops. Maybe occasional search warrant at a house, things like that. But you have a different approach than a lot of cops do because you were more behind the scenes with the larger investigations and things like that. So if you want to take a moment, kind of let the listeners know a little bit about yourself. You don't have to go into super deep detail, but let them know kind of a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
And then we'll go from there.
So this is my 19th year in law enforcement.
Okay.
And when I first started out in law enforcement, I was in patrol for a couple of years. And after about 2.5 years or so, I joined the narcotics task force in the agency that I worked for at the time. And I ended up spending about 8 years in narcotics with that agency.
I got you.
And then transferred to another agency in narcotics and spent about 1.5 years. That's where I met you, actually.
Yeah.
And then from there, I went into regular CID, which is Criminal Investigations Division for the listeners, where I was a detective, doing homicides and major crimes, anything else that a normal detective does.
Right.
And during that whole time, also starting about in 2009, I was also on SWAT and SRT. And when I was with the DEA task force, I was also asked to be on their SRT team as well. So did a lot of traveling and a lot of high-risk stuff throughout our field division, which is 4 states.
So I know that one of the things that a lot of people they don't realize their experience with law enforcement will be maybe them dealing with cops who pull them over or show up to a car wreck or what they see on TV.
Sure.
And one of the things that we kind of run into a lot is or that we're trying to get a lot of the listeners to understand is, while you see a lot of stuff on TV, the door kicking, and running down bad guys and the pursuits, vehicle pursuits, foot chases, and doing the apprehension work. Like there's a side of it. Don't get me wrong. It's exciting.
Right.
I don't want to say we're adrenaline junkies, but it's a feeling like nothing else. But the downside of that is, there's stress that hits your body. There's between emotions of fear and excitement and everything, all that plays into it.
Right.
Did you with your experience and did you find that you were overly subjected to a lot of stress in that realm?
Yes.
And I think that a lot of listeners, it's going to be. They may not be cops or whatever, and this is not just strictly law enforcement related.
Correct.
Obviously, this applies to guys who, whether they're turning wrenches
Sure.
into plants
Sure.
or doctors on the scalpels. I'm sure they've got stress. Like everybody's got a level of stress that they've got no matter what. We're approaching it from a standpoint of what we're familiar with. And in this case, you working with the doing narcotics. Do you want to delve into that a little bit as far as how you used to do some of those investigations?
Yeah. So it is very stressful, and as far like you said, different aspects of the job carry their own stressors.
Right.
And working narcotics work typically. That's why you see a lot of narcotics agents, at local level. They normally are pulled out within about 2.5, 3 years, and they don't last much longer than that, just because of the burnout and the stress that's involved with it. But I was able to last about 10 years total in narcotics before I decided to transfer and get out of the stress of it. But dealing with confidential informants and part of our aspect of our job is we have to go through a portion of a hostage rescue school, because we are responsible for that confidential informant or the undercover cop, if they're in there doing a deal or whatever. So when we're shadowing them,
I went through one of them schools, and they're pretty intense. I don't know if you had the opportunity to go through one. It is an intense.
It's
not law enforcement, but yes.
But when you've got that kind of stressors you're dealing with, not only having to worry about your life and your team that you're with life, but you're also having to worry about a confidential source or a UC.
Right.
At any second, when they're in there doing a deal. Yeah.
Because you're dealing with dangerous people.
Very dangerous.
It's not it's not grandma that you pull over for a speeding ticket.
No, they're not.
That hey, you can relax a little bit. From the moment you start talking to these people.
No, absolutely. They're not going in there to teach a Sunday school lesson.
Right.
And,
right.
So it's very stressful, and I think the most common thing that we always said was there's no hands on the dope clock, because it's 24/7.
Right.
And that was the other stressor, was you never knew when you're going to get called out, because a load of dope may be coming through. You may have a confidential source call you in the middle of the night, say, hey, we need this guy's ready. He's a source, and we need to go make this buy. And so that was all the time. And eventually I finally got burned out with it, and I asked my supervisor. I said, I missed everything with my son growing up, and I had a younger daughter at the time, and I said, I don't want to miss everything with her.
Yeah.
So that's when I asked to transfer into regular CID, but I didn't realize that at the agency I was at, the call out was just astronomical.
Just as much.
Just
as much.
Different type of call out, dealing with major crimes, and
just as demanding,
and homicides and everything else. But it was just different.
I know. I had one of my friends he was excited to start narcotics, to work in the narcotics division, and I think he had kind of this romanticized view of what it was going to be. Hey, you're going after the big kilos and large loads of dope. It's basically he's going to catch Pablo Escobar by himself type thing. And it was. I talked to him a couple weeks later. He goes, man. He said, and I'm sure you can confirm this. Those CIs that call all the time, they're not always calling when they're sober.
No,
they're not. It'll be 2 or 3 in the morning, and they're tweaking balls, man. And and you have to deal with that. And correct me if I'm wrong. The policy is when they call, you have to answer.
Oh yeah. You gotta answer.
You don't get to ignore it, because like you said, you don't know what it's
right.
going to be.
It could be a life or death type thing.
So you go from 3 in the morning sleeping nice and comfortable, and got that good little snooze going on, to all of a sudden you got a tweaker, screaming in the phone because, some imaginary animals, running through his house.
Right.
And that has happened.
So before you settled on writing as kind of like your outlet for, putting it down, were there other outlets you tried to use to relieve that stress or that tension that's built up?
To a point, I guess being a guy, and married, I would talk some to my wife, and to a point tell her some things. Obviously I don't want to burden her with some of the aspects of our job. You don't want to do that, but I just found that compartmentalizing it was just not working. Because we would even have to respond to overdose deaths. At the time, that's part of being a narcotics agent. So there's that aspect too. Dealing with death, and
can you? So we've done it. Can you give your definition of, or explanation of what compartmentalization would be to someone who, let's say, isn't in law enforcement, who wants to know what that is? Because that's like we try to make the point that, hey, a lot of what we deal with, is relative to the civilian world. Could you kind of show your explanation of that?
Absolutely. So, the way I kind of compartmentalize it. And I guess it's kind of the way that anybody who's had traumatic events, whether
Right.
even civilians, have traumatic events that happen, and to a point they also compartmentalize in their own way. But the way that I kind of compartmentalized it was, as bad as it sounds, when I would deal with death, I would just not. I would try not to see it as a person.
Right.
And,
Right.
I saw it as a job. I had to get this job done, and the other aspect of it was, this person, whoever they are, they have family, and I want to make whatever the best decision is, to try and give them some sort of closure,
Right.
and in that way it helped me a little bit, in my mind in the healing process of dealing with those particular instances.
Right.
But I guess compartmentalization, just in not seeing as what it really was,
Right.
and then, in the writing that, it was a little different as far as just dealing with the stress of the job, because I actually wrote the first 3 pages of my book I wrote in 2018 when I was still with the DEA task force. And that's actually how I was dealing with the stress at the time. I said, I could write a little bit. I'd written some stuff over the years, nothing that ever got published or anything, just some small, things. And I said, I'm just going to sit down and just put some things on paper that, just to, decompress. And that's how I wrote the first 3 pages of the book. And at that time when I did that, I was like, this is helping. It helped me to do that. And that's not obviously for everybody, but it definitely helped me to put that on paper.
Why do you think that is? You think it's being able to focus your attention to something else other than work? Obviously, at this point,
sure.
I haven't read the
Sure.
first 3 pages. So
Weird.
for those of you who don't know, I gave John a hard time for not reading Jason's book
That we just got.
prior to this. But what made the first 3 pages so therapeutic for you?
So the first 3 pages of the book ended up being about page 20.
Okay.
When I finally sat down a few years later and said I'm going to finish what I started. But they were therapeutic because the first 3 pages I wrote were kind of the beginning of an action sequence, and my books are fiction thrillers. And in doing that, when I sit down to write, and again, everyone's different. Some people can journal, and
Right.
get things out. Some people can just sit down and write poetry and get things out.
I do that.
Don't you lie.
My outlet is fiction, and I guess I guess I have a creative mind to a point, and when I sit down to write, it kind of puts me in a total different place.
Right.
A lot of people ask me, do you do a timeline, when you sit down and write, or, do you do a time wheel? A lot of people do what's called a time wheel for all their characters to know what's going on. But I don't, and that's part of I believe, the therapy portion of writing for me, because I don't know what's going to happen next. It puts me in that, that
You're just like the reader. You're like, surprise.
It seriously is.
I love
that. I
that.
don't know what's going to happen next.
I love that.
Start writing, so.
So I have a question, and don't feel like you have to go too far in depth with it. You brought up that you didn't go in depth with your significant other on some of the stuff that was weighing on you.
Sure.
And this is a conversation that Mike and I have had several times, that it's not that part of it is you don't want to burden them, but the other part of it is for them to understand the complexity of what you're going through.
Correct.
You'd have to go farther in depth and almost open a window.
Yeah, and that's
that you don't want them to see
exactly,
through.
and that's a window. I wouldn't want them to see. See
Right,
into.
right.
But yes, you're right. I have a wonderful wife. She's always been completely understanding about my job and my work. She knew when I went into narcotics that I wouldn't be home a lot.
Right.
She would be basically a single mom there for a lot of the events my kids were going to, and things like that. I'd have to leave in the middle of or whatever.
Right.
But she did know, very limited things that were going on.
So, did you ever try to reach out? And I'm specifically asking this question on purpose. Did you ever reach out to anybody else you worked with about any of the stressors or things that were bothering you?
I don't know about reached out, but we had discussions. Yes, I guess in a way. One of the guys I work with, I've had several partners, that I say partners, ones that I rode with or were super close with, that we did day-to-day interactions in narcotics.
Right.
Call your partner, and